Chapter 1. The dreamer long ago, in the land of Canaan, there lived a boy named Joseph. He was 17 years old, full of life and curiosity, and he had a heart that beat with kindness. Joseph lived with his father Jacob and 11 brothers. Life in their household was busy and sometimes chaotic. After all, with 12 boys under one roof, there was never a dull moment. But Joseph wasn't just any ordinary boy. He was his father's favorite, and everyone knew it. Jacob had waited many years for Joseph to be born, and because Joseph was the first son of Rachel, Jacob's beloved wife, he held a special place in his heart. To show his love, Jacob gave Joseph a beautiful robe. It shimmered in the sunlight, woven with threads of deep red, ocean blue, royal purple, and shining gold. No one else had a robe like it. Joseph wore it proudly, walking through the fields and around the tents as his brothers looked on, their faces tight with jealousy. "Why does he get such fine clothes?" they grumbled. "Why does father love him more than us?" But what made their jealousy burn even hotter wasn't just the robe. It was Joseph's dreams. One night, Joseph dreamed that he and his brothers were tying bundles of grain in the field. Suddenly, his bundle stood upright, while the bundles of his brothers gathered around and bowed down to it. The next morning, Joseph shared his dream eagerly. "Listen to what I dreamed last night," he said, his eyes sparkling. "We were in the field binding grain, and my bundle stood tall, and yours bowed down to mine." His brothers looked at each other, then glared at Joseph. "So, you think you'll rule over us now?" One of them sneered. "You dream of being king, do you?" But Joseph didn't stop dreaming. A few days later, he had another dream. "This time," he told them, "the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed down to me." Even his father frowned when he heard that. "What kind of dream is this?" Jacob asked. "Do you really think your mother and I and your brothers will all bow down to you?" But deep down, Jacob wondered. Joseph's dreams were strange and powerful. Perhaps, just perhaps, they meant something more. The days went by, and Joseph's dreams continued to grow, even as the distance between him and his brothers grew wider. They couldn't stand the way he talked about ruling over them. They hated the way he smiled in that bright, innocent way, so sure that something great was coming. And so, while Joseph dreamed of greatness, his brothers began to dream of something else, something darker. But Joseph, still young and full of hope, had no idea what was coming. He only knew that his dreams felt real, and he believed, somehow, that they would come true. Chapter 2. The Coat of Many Colors. The days in Canaan were warm and golden. Shepherds moved their flocks across the fields, and families lived in tents, cooking over open fires and telling stories under the stars. In Jacob's household, however, the warmth in the air didn't match the feelings in his sons' hearts. Joseph's brothers were angry. They were tired of him always talking about his dreams, tired of the way he wore that special robe, his coat of many colors like a crown. Every thread in that robe reminded them that their father loved Joseph more than them. They tried not to show it, but jealousy can grow like a weed, silent, creeping, and dangerous. One morning, Jacob called Joseph aside. "Your brothers are in Shechem, tending the flocks," he said. "I want you to go and check on them. See if all is well and bring me back a report." Joseph nodded. "I'll go right away, father." He put on his robe, tied his sandals, and set out across the land. It was a long journey, but Joseph was used to walking. Along the way, he passed trees heavy with fruit, streams that sparkled in the sunlight, and hills where wildflowers danced in the wind. But when he reached Shechem, his brothers were nowhere to be found. A man saw Joseph wandering and asked, "Who are you looking for?" "My brothers," Joseph replied. "They were here with the sheep." "Oh, I heard them say they were going to Dothan," the man said. "That's where you'll find them." So Joseph kept walking, unaware that something dangerous was waiting for him. From a distance, his brothers saw him coming. "Here comes the dreamer," one of them said bitterly. They didn't see a brother. They saw the robe. They saw the dreams. They saw the favorite. And in that moment, an idea took hold, an idea born from jealousy and anger. "Let's kill him," one brother whispered. The others looked around in shock. "Kill him?" "Yes. Let's throw him into a pit and say a wild animal got him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." But Reuben, the oldest, stepped forward. "No, let's not kill him. Just throw him into the pit. Don't lay a hand on him." Reuben planned to come back later and rescue Joseph. When Joseph finally reached them, smiling and tired from the journey, he didn't expect what came next. They grabbed him. They tore off his beautiful coat, the coat of many colors, and threw him into a dry, empty pit. The walls were steep and the ground was hard. Joseph called out, but no one answered. Above him, his brothers sat down and ate lunch, ignoring his cries. Then a caravan of traders appeared in the distance. Camels loaded with spices and goods moved slowly along the road to Egypt. An idea sparked. "Why kill him?" Judah said. "Let's sell him to these traders. That way we don't have to hurt him, and we'll get something in return." The others agreed. They pulled Joseph from the pit, sold him for 20 pieces of silver, and watched as he was taken away, bound and scared, looking back at them with wide, hurt eyes. Later, they dipped his robe in goat's blood and carried it home to their father. "Is this your son's coat?" they asked Jacob. Jacob held it in shaking hands. "It is," he whispered. "A wild animal must have devoured him." He tore his clothes and wept. No one could comfort him. Meanwhile, far from home, Joseph bounced on the back of a camel, heading toward Egypt, his robe gone, his heart broken, and his dreams fading in the wind. But even then, God was with him, and Joseph's story was far from over. Chapter 3. Betrayed by Blood. The desert wind blew hot and dry as the traders led their caravan south, away from Canaan and toward Egypt. Joseph sat in silence, his hands tied, his eyes full of confusion and pain. Just yesterday, he had been safe at home. Now he was a prisoner, sold like an animal by the very brothers he loved. His heart hurt more than his bruises. He couldn't understand why they hated him so much. Was it his dreams? The robe? Had he done something wrong? The caravan moved slowly, the camels groaning under their heavy loads of spices and precious oils. Joseph didn't speak. He just watched the world pass by, the changing colors of the sand, the sky turning from blue to gold, then fading into night. When they finally reached Egypt, it was like nothing Joseph had ever seen. Tall stone buildings stretched into the sky, carved with strange symbols. There were statues of creatures with animal heads and human bodies, and people dressed in fine linen bustling through crowded markets. Music floated through the air, along with the smell of bread, spices, and animals. Joseph barely had time to look around before he was taken to the slave market. He stood in a line with others, foreigners like him, frightened and silent. A man named Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard, came to the market. He was looking for a strong, intelligent young man to work in his household. His eyes fell on Joseph. "This one," Potiphar said. "I'll take him." And just like that, Joseph's life changed again. He was brought to Potiphar's grand house, filled with servants and guards. Everything was polished and perfect. But Joseph didn't feel perfect. He felt alone. Still, he worked hard, doing every task with care. Whether sweeping the floors, tending the gardens, or managing the storerooms, he gave it his best, and God was with him. Slowly, Potiphar began to notice something different about Joseph. He was honest, wise, and everything. He touched seemed to succeed, so Potiphar put Joseph in charge of his entire household. Joseph, once a slave, was now the most trusted servant in the house. But back in Canaan, Joseph's family was still grieving. Jacob sat alone most days, holding the torn, blood-stained robe in his hands. His eyes had grown tired from crying, and his heart ached with loss. "I'll never see my son again," he whispered over and over. The brothers kept their terrible secret. Some nights they couldn't sleep. Guilt crept into their dreams, and they remembered the look on Joseph's face as they sold him, but they didn't speak of it. They just tried to forget. Yet even miles away, in a foreign land, Joseph hadn't forgotten his family, or his dreams. Though life had changed completely, he still believed, deep inside, that somehow one day his dreams would come true. For now, he would wait, and he would trust. Because even in the darkest places, Joseph was not alone. Chapter 4. A Slave in Egypt, Joseph's. Days in Potiphar's house began early. The sun rose over the stone rooftops of Egypt, casting golden light across the city. While the other servants yawned and stretched, Joseph was already working, watering the gardens, checking supplies, and preparing orders for the day. Everything Joseph did, he did with care and faithfulness. He didn't complain. He didn't try to escape. Instead, he trusted that God had a reason for bringing him to Egypt, even if he didn't understand it yet. Potiphar noticed. It wasn't long before Joseph was no longer just another servant. Potiphar placed him in charge of his entire household. Joseph managed the food, the money, the workers, and even helped make decisions. Potiphar trusted him so much that he didn't worry about anything except what he wanted to eat. Joseph was still young, but he was wise beyond his years. His heart stayed strong, even when he missed his home or thought of his father. He still wondered why his brothers had betrayed him, but he didn't let bitterness take root. Instead, he focused on being the best version of himself, kind, honest, and faithful. But even when everything seems to be going well, trouble can come. Potiphar's wife was used to getting what she wanted. She was powerful, beautiful, and bored. She noticed Joseph, how hard he worked, how strong he looked, and how confident he was. One day, when they were alone in the house, she said, "Come with me, Joseph." Joseph's heart pounded. He knew what she meant, and he knew it was wrong. "No," he said firmly. "My master trusts me with everything. How could I do such a terrible thing? It would be a sin against God." But she didn't stop. Day after day, she tried to tempt him, but Joseph always refused. Then one day, as Joseph entered the house to do his work, no one else was inside. Potiphar's wife grabbed his robe and said again, "Come with me." Joseph pulled away and ran, leaving. His robe behind, angry and humiliated, she screamed. When the other servants rushed in, she held up the robe and told a terrible lie. "This Hebrew slave tried to attack me," she cried. "See? He left his robe." When Potiphar came home and heard her story, his face turned dark with anger. Without asking Joseph what really happened, he had him thrown into prison. Once again, Joseph was torn from everything he had built. His reputation was ruined. He had done the right thing, but was punished anyway. Now, the prison walls were his. New home, cold, dark, lonely, but even there, God was with Joseph. The prison warden noticed how trustworthy Joseph was. Soon Joseph was put in charge of the other prisoners. He helped organize chores, keep the peace, and care for others. Just like in Potiphar's house, Joseph brought order and kindness to a place of despair. He didn't give up. He didn't lose hope. Even in the shadows of the prison, Joseph believed that his story wasn't over, and once again, his dreams, though distant, still lived in his heart.